Take good, everyone.
Welcome to Chapter 10, Part 4, and we're carrying on from last week. We've got Chris with us today and Priyank. Mike can't be with us today, but he's here in spirit, I'm sure. So yes, last week we had little Mukunda being berated for his eating habits and reliance, and he's decided to go on a fast. With doubled zest as we begin this part of the chapter. So he's full of vigor and ready to go. He's on his fast, his 24-hour fast, and he's now exceeding, I believe, the 24-hour fast and awaiting for the first meal, which we know comes in their living quarters at midday. And I love this initial vigor thing. I feel like it's a very relatable thing on the path. You know, when you first start doing something, you go, "Yes, I'm gonna do it," and you go all in, and it's all this energy. You know, it's like, can we sustain this? But he tried, and yes, Chris, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but when I do fasting, sometimes the hardest part is just doing it, saying, okay, sometimes I'm going to do it, because we're in such habits of waking up, maybe breaking the fast, or maybe just wait until lunch, or whatever you do. We're in such habits of eating. Sometimes that's the hardest bit. But once my body gets into it, it finds it easier and easier. And not always. Sometimes it is pretty tough. It can be challenging, but for the most part, if I wake up in the morning time, I'm usually not struck with this pang of hunger or whatever might come with it. And I find that I can roll it through until midday. So whenever I first talked about fasting to someone very close to me, the response was, a rebuttal. It was uproar. Why would you want to fast? I'm skinny enough as it is. Do you I really want to go and do fasting? But it's such a vital part of our practice and everything. I think with practice comes, becomes easier and easier. So just when I see this, I awaited the following midday. I thought, Yogananda could probably do this for a lot longer, and he's probably well practiced. So for him, it's, I imagine, a bit of a walk in the park. But it just reminded me of my own little journey when I started doing the fasting and how it went for me.
I fast once a week, as I think I've probably told both of you, and today happens to fall on that day, so I'm fasting today as we speak. And I share your experiences, Chris. Most days are, because I've been doing it for over 10 years now. Most days are pretty. I don't even feel that I'm missing anything, but some days are more challenging. Don't know why that becomes, but that's how it is. But Chris, you said you do it till midday. Is that like after the whole day and then the midday the next day, you mean?
Yeah, it almost becomes 2
40,
days.
40 hours, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
get
quite cool.
I get people give me odd looks. I stayed with a couple friends of mine, and they're like, "Have you eaten today?" It's like, dinner time. No. And then the next day came, and it's like, "Have you eaten yet?" And I hadn't really thought about it, but to them it was this wildly thing to do.
I was speaking to someone at the center, and they know one of the monks, or one of the training monks, and she was telling me that he was doing a 4-day fast, like a complete fast, no water, 4 days, and she was saying that they've got Guruji's given a special breathing and meditation technique for fasting. I'm yet to uncover that, but apparently it's there for the really like hardcore fasts. But yeah.
Not to deviate too much, but isn't there? Guruji went to see a lady whose name's escaping me.
Girivala.
Girivala.
Girivala, the lady who never eats.
Yeah. I think she was given that ability. We're going to go into it in Autobiography of a Yogi, but that was through a technique, wasn't it? That she was given. I think was it through pranayama? it's been a while since I've read that chapter actually. But yeah, it just shows that maybe it is possible to live without this, material substance. But it's a very interesting subject, one for maybe future generations to unveil.
Mm. I don't know if you've noticed, but like the more you fast, the more that kind of consciousness becomes like in the brain, doesn't it? It's like actually the food is not such a big, point of reliability, but you're right, other people around you just cannot comprehend it sometimes. Um, I'm like you, Chris. I also get the comments because I also have a very slim body. It's like, what? You're not eating? It's like, oh, no, actually, and that's great. Um, but yeah, it's a great practice if you're able to do it. So yes, back to the chapter. So Mukunda is fasting and he's waiting for Dayananda ji because he's been away and he's coming back, and he gets told by Jitendra that when Dayananda ji arrives, then they will eat their food. But he says that his train is late, and Guruji describes this as devastating news. Kind of relatable, you've been fasting. I know some mornings when I wake up after a fast, I'm just, absolutely ravenous. Like, yeah, pretty actually, like miming shoveling the food in. I mean, it can be like that sometimes. So, yeah, I can imagine how devastating it would be to be told, no, you're not allowed yet.
Obviously, we're going to unpack this a little bit with what Yogananda, or young Mukunda, is going through in this moment. How he's saying, he thought this was devastating news. He was looking forward to eating, and maybe he was simply planning to eat. So then that planning to eat had triggered the digestive juices, and then actually the anticipation of that meant that it was devastating, as opposed to maybe just having set his mind and using his willpower, going through this entire day again, or doing a 3-day fast or something. Maybe that anticipation, that mental anticipation, really caused this news to be devastating.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, isn't it? Yeah, it's true. Because if you've got your mindset that you're not eating today, it's like, okay, that's that then. Yeah, I'm also curious about whether the late train was a quote unquote coincidence. I'm not sure I believe anything is a coincidence anymore. But or if Dayananda ji did it on purpose, or if it was by God's hand. It's a point of curiosity, but in any case, the train is late and they have to wait, and that rhymed. And and
that wasn't planned at all, was it, Lauren?
That wasn't planned at all. No.
Take
got
off
it on
your
my
notes.
notes. Take off
bold,
the rhyme.
bold. Emphasize rhyme.
If only I was that organized. So yeah, not only is it devastating enough that the train is late and he can't eat yet, but also they're getting ready for the Swami to arrive. So they're making all this lovely food in preparation, and it's all aromas are filling the air. And he says, nothing else offering what could be swallowed except my pride in yesterday's fast. And it just reminds me, like, there's so much temptation, isn't there, in general in the world, but particularly when you're fasting. I often fast on a Friday is my usual day. I'm not fasting today, but usually I fast on a Friday, and that's a work day as well for me. And people are having their lunch and things, and I'm not usually tempted, but there is so much temptation, isn't there, to just kind of reach for the food. Yeah, Chris.
I think what this is highlighting to me is the biggest temptation of eating food, apart from your hunger, of course, but is the social aspect of it, is the actual interaction of are we eating today? Are we sitting down to break bread, with my family? We've got plans, or we're going to be in this social group. We have to go out for X meal, or it's going to be awkward for somebody if you don't do it. These kind of conversations do crop up, especially if you're in a relationship. It's part and parcel of maybe cohabitating. and being social. And I find over the years that if anything, if anything has caused a bit of you know um, friction or some kind of challenge to overcome, it's more of that social um, orderliness that you have to establish in order to continue with your practice. And this has obviously come as a surprise to Guruji, which is life, isn't it? Something happens on the day. Maybe you've got to react, and Guruji is sharing this moment in his life.
Mm. Definitely true about the temptations, especially in this age. I think it's probably worse in this age than most other times in the recent past, because there's there's not only a shop in every street corner, but there's also little stalls everywhere, and the one thing they sell is things in like shiny wrappers that are extremely tasty and salty and all the things that we all love to taste. So I think it's quite difficult, isn't it, right now in this
Mm.
time that we're living to be disciplined. Whereas before, I can imagine dinner time was dinner time. You might have a lunch like that you may take to work, but there's no like stuff in between that you could just no vending machines and things like that are so prominent now. But I find that as you guys mentioned, it's all in the mind, isn't it? Like in the previous section, Dayananda told Mukunda, like, if ever you feel hungry, do not mention it. And Chris and I discussed this in the last episode, and it was like we're essentially saying that it's a negative affirmation, isn't it? Which also exists, like I'm hungry, I can't live without food, and then it becomes true. So Dayananda's giving him the little clue there, and that was one of the big lessons here. Like, don't affirm negative things or things that you don't want to happen or you don't think you can change. Just better to be silent or say the opposite thing. I'm not
Mm.
hungry. I'm a master of my palate, and all the good stuff such as that. Much
Yeah.
easier though to do that when you're fasting, because when you're fasting, you like your mindset is that, isn't it? You're trying to get into the thing, the philosophy of food doesn't sustain me, God sustains me.
Mm.
So that's like well, it should be a background mantra for you whilst fasting. So then when you're passing that sweet wrapper, that's not an option for you today. So there's literally no temptation because you've set your mind to not conceiving that. So I feel like it's a very powerful thing to fast, and then that then kind of spills over into the days when you're not fasting, but you don't want to eat that stuff.
Yeah, and especially with eating the right foods as well, there is that extra layer of temptation is all around us, isn't it? Foods that we know aren't really good for the body, and it's everywhere. And I think, yeah, Priyank, using those affirmations as well would be really, really helpful.
I want to know what what are Priyank's affirmations, the most powerful affirmations that he uses.
I think I told you, didn't I? But as I say, food and fasting, I've been doing it so long that it's not really a challenge for me. But I think I told you that I criticize criticize a lot, and I remember recently there was a reading that I did about criticism at the center, and it was essentially saying rather than criticize, uh, do suggestion, and the power of suggestion is more powerful than the critic. But anyway, I'm trying to stop criticizing, and the affirmation that I use is as I radiate sympathy and goodwill to others, I open the channel for God's love to come to me, and divine love is the magnet that attracts all blessedness, which is a really nice, nice one because it actually does like the complete opposite of criticism. It also makes you see the best qualities in the person that you're about to criticize, which is really nice because it goes beyond just stopping you from criticizing, but thinking about all good and beneficial things.
Mm. And you
Nice.
have such a pure, loving heart, Priyank. It's, yeah, it's,
Guruji's
yeah,
doing.
of course, but still, you're letting it flow through. So, yeah.
Very sweet.
Um, kind of feels weird to go back to the chapter now, but we're going to have to. So off we go.
Done.
Um, so yes, it's just been told this devastating news, and then Guruji implores to God and says, "Lord, hasten the train." So he's obviously not very happy about the fact that he's going to have to carry on with his fast. And first I just want to highlight this point. I feel like this is also very relatable in many different circumstances. I feel like I know I've certainly been there when I thought, well, God, such even, hasten the train or make the train late, small things like this. And sometimes he listens and sometimes he doesn't. But in this case, he doesn't listen, or he listens but doesn't give Mukunda what he wants. And Guruji says that he basically thinks that God didn't have a hand in this interdiction by which he was late. Anyway, but the clock went on and it became night, I believe, as darkness descended. And finally, in the nighttime, in the darkness, Dayananda Ji comes through the door and Guruji says, "My greeting was one of sheer joy." And I laughed so much when I read this because it's like Guruji is not really happy to see him, but it's more like his presence brings the prospect of food.
Ulterior motives, eh?
Yeah, right.
Welcome. Let's take your jacket off.
Indeed. It just cracked me up when I read it. I mean, it's understandable as well, isn't it? But then, much to his dismay, Jitendra, the omen of bad news, again, he calls him the bird of ill omen, says that the Swami is going to bathe and meditate before they eat. And Priyank actually found, no, you didn't find, but you made a comment about this. And I wonder if you could share it with us.
Yeah, so he's basically showering essentially and physically cleansing himself because he's been out and about, and he probably was a Brahmin by birth, and it's an educated guess, shall we say, that he was, especially in those times, to be in that kind of a position. You'd have to have been that in that caste or in that subsect. But now it's slightly different. Now castes have taken a less of importance in this kind of field. Like Guruji talks about castes in the Bhagavad Gita being not hereditary, but what qualities do we have, and that determines what caste we belong to. And Brahmin caste is one of contemplative and spiritual qualities, and or goodness and things like that. So he was probably a Brahmin, and he mentions that he a bit later he mentions that he has certain injunctions where he has to basically do various rituals before doing certain things. Before eating, you'd especially in the morning, you wouldn't think of eating before first having a shower. And this is also apparently true because when he goes out, and in the next section he calls it the grossness, doesn't he? When he's been out and with the grossness of essentially the material world, and rubbing shoulders with whoever, it impacts him essentially, and he calls it shastric rules for monks of my particular order, and he calls them heterogeneous vibrations of the worldly people. So it must be true that the company you keep, or the environment that you're in, has an impact on some spiritual side, your aura or your psyche, your emotions, physically even perhaps as well. So he's basically trying to undo that because he's entering his now own home, and he's essentially trying to reset himself. So that's what he's doing. And he said that interesting that he also said meditation as well. It wasn't just a shower. Nowadays it's just shower, but he's going to meditate as well, which is pretty cool.
And this applies for all types of baths, Priyank, I believe. You maybe know more about this than I do then. Like fire baths, air baths, not just water baths or showers, but
Yeah,
yeah,
different for different purposes.
yeah. Because I was, coming in very green behind the ears, as we say, with the Indian sort of culture and yogic culture, Hindu culture practices. When I was in the SRF center in London, first when I saw fire and people sort of taking in the fire and sort of waving it over their head, and it just struck me. I was like, wow, what's going on there? And I went away and read a little bit about it, but it's fascinating to me that we can actually cleanse our energies by having these different types of baths. You might want to stand in strong winds for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, if you've got a certain disposition and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a good one to pick up. I'm glad you were able to we're able to talk about that today, because it's something that isn't really in the conversation, certainly in the West.
Mm. I love also how that you highlighted this, Priyank. How he says not only is he going to wash his body, but also going to meditate. This is personally something I've been practicing for quite a while now. I found it really helpful because for me, it's like often I'll come home from work and then shower and I'll meditate, and it's like I put the soul first before I feed the body. And I love that, this is kind of happening here. He's taking care of the body, but he's also washing his mind in the waters of meditation, right? And getting in touch, in tune with the soul and with God. So yeah, it's really wonderful, and it's a lovely thing to practice if we can, if our schedules allow it. So yes, Guruji gets this news, and I'm going to read this next bit out because it's so dramatic. I love it. It says, "I was in near collapse. My young stomach, new to deprivation, protested with gnawing vigor. Pictures I had seen of famine victims passed wraith-like before me. The next Banaras death from starvation is due at once in this hermitage, I thought." It's so full of imagery, isn't it? And it's just it has the kind of like a childlike quality to it. Like when I don't know if you ever had this, but when you lived with your parents and dinner was late and suddenly you thought the whole world was about to end because you were so hungry. It kind of reminds me of that.
His reactions sound comical, but you sense that he was actually going through some physical turmoil, like when your stomach's like turning and there's an actual physical pain sometimes when you're hungry. And obviously if you've not eaten for many days like the hungry people in the world, and then that's definitely true. But even for Mukunda, who's never been used to missing a meal, essentially he's ate three. We discussed last time even the breakfasts were colossal in his household probably. But interestingly, his sisters, even though they had virtually the same upbringing, and Mukunda was far more spiritual, shall we say, than his sisters. His sisters would have fasted because women undertake various fasts, and it's different for different parts of India, but it's ingrained in their culture. So even if they're not doing it for spiritual reasons, for example, there's a Jaya Parvati Vrat, which young girls do, and it's essentially they put the spin they put on it as girls you should fast during these 5 nights or 7 nights. I can't remember exactly the number, and then during that time you can't have salt, you can only have fruits, and then you can't eat at certain times, and then you can only eat if the moon is showing. So if there's clouds, you can't can't eat. So the girls the young girls are looking at the sky to wait to when they can break their fast. So different parts of India have got these different little cultural, very cute little elements. But obviously, the underlying thing is the spiritual benefits of fasting, but they embed it in the culture through various tales and stories of the gods, and the relevance of it and the grace that you can get in your life just by doing these fasts. So his sisters probably would have done these things, but not so much him, and his mum definitely would have.
Mm.
So my wife, she used to do that fast before we got married, and then now she does it. She's put a spin on it, so now she does the same fast, but it's for the health of the health of her husband or her spouse or the nearest and loved one. So she does the same thing. So she's put her own spin on it, but essentially it's achieving the same thing, i.e. self mastery. And I equally have now joined that fast. It's usually only girls that do it, but because my wife's doing it, I've joined her. So I said it's for your health that I'm doing it. So you use
Aw.
whatever you use whatever you can to conquer this plane.
That's so sweet. Love that. It's lovely. Unfortunately, Guruji didn't have anyone to fast for him on this occasion. He was alone in his fast, potentially, that we know of. And he says that, the impending doom was averted at 9 o'clock. So I assumed that, the Swami came down at 9 and they had their meal. And Guruji describes it as ambrosial summons. In memory, that evening meal is vivid as one of life's perfect hours. And I really love this part because I just had a little moment of reflection. I was thinking, even when Guruji wrote this book, he was still thinking of that time as one of life's perfect hours, still kind of treasuring that moment where he got to eat. But it's very memorable, isn't it? It's your first fast. And, it was a big one. And not only did he get to break the fast after so long, there were many life lessons that were learned, as we'll come to, but also it was a beautiful feast as well to break the fast, wasn't it? The Swami's homecoming.
I remember when I did my first fast, and I waited till midnight the following day. 1 minute past midnight, I had everything ready. Through the clock struck. I started shoveling the food.
It's relatable.
Not really in the spirit of the occasion, but that's what I did. But we all start somewhere, I suppose.
You do, and you've done the 24 hours in effect then, and some days are like that. I also get those times where I'm not in that level of consciousness yet where I can wait until breakfast or noon, and that's okay. We have got to start somewhere. That's true.
Yes.
But this is very what do you call it, inspiring, and this talk as well is, I'm sure anyone's listening also feeling in zestful vigor to fast, perhaps. Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, I should say, just on the sort of topic about the real life, say, practical roadblocks and different bits and pieces that people on the yogic path and doing fasting might actually come across. I think it's often perceived that sort of it's a way of almost like self-punishment or something. There's some kind of sort of frowned upon attitude from, say, general populace on fasting, and especially when it comes to spiritual practice. And there's possibly some truth in that, in some ways, where um, the Buddha, when he was Gautama Buddha, when he was doing fasting, he went to many extremes to the point where he was essentially making himself suffer. And I believe then when he became enlightened, the first thing he did, he said, "Let's eat." And he had this sort of joyous moment with his disciples. They were all confused, like, "What do you mean? Like, we're starving ourselves for you? Like, you've been telling us to do this. Like, is this not a path, like a way of suffering?" Like, and maybe that's that story, or there's something in the subconscious or in the psyche there whenever you talk about it. But actually, as Guruji's sort of indicating here, like, it's one of life's perfect hours that he was able to embrace going back to eating. And there's great joy in eating, and it's something that we should all embrace and not sort of try to look at it as if it's some evil or wrong. And it's all good that we're conquering this plane, as you were saying, Priyank. But I think it's just important to note that Guruji's being very lighthearted about it here, and that's probably how we should be, as opposed to too much on the sort of old Gautama side of things, where
Yeah,
there's
Guruji's
punishment.
very balanced, isn't he? And that's what's so great about this path, I feel. You know, we eat for the body and to keep it healthy, right? And it's no bad thing. That's good. God gave us this little vessel, so we've got to look after it. But equally, it's not being so wrapped up, I guess, in the consciousness of the body having the most importance. But interestingly, we're going to talk about eating now, because as Guruji was intensely absorbed in his meal, as he writes it, which is a very telling couplet of words. He obviously has that consciousness of being so much in the body and the food as he is. He says that he's also noticed that the Swami isn't eating like he's eating, and he's actually eating quite absent-mindedly. And he says he was apparently above my gross pleasures. And something I was curious about was eating absent-mindedly. It's quite a curious topic, because there's a certain school of thought that we give the food to God, right? We do our prayers on SRF, and we offer God the food. And I know that the monks and the nuns, they eat in silence to really give reverence to God and spend that time. And I remember a talk with one of the sisters. I can't remember which one it was now, but she mentioned, it was very briefly, but she said, you actually absorb more nutrients in your food if you concentrate on it while you're eating. And that always really stuck with me. So then it kind of begs the question, okay, eating absent-mindedly, how does this fit in all together? Priyank, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I need to work on that. I take eating for granted. I shouldn't do that. But one of the monks recently said, he said, before eating, obviously we do the prayer for food, which is, Heavenly Father, bless this food, make it holy, let no impurity of greed defile it. The food comes from thee, it is for thy temple, spiritualize it. Spirit to spirit goes. We are the petals of thy manifestation. Thou art the flower, its life, beauty, and loveliness. Permeate our souls with the fragrance of your presence. It's so much more than food in that prayer, isn't it? And that's, I think, is the subtle the reason why we're doing it. And but the monk also said he actually spends before like the meal's ready, everything's ready, knife and fork, the plate's ready to be eaten. He'll spend 2 minutes in silence just with the food before even starting to eat. And I thought, wow, that's the polar opposite of what I do. Whereas I finished that, I usually do this prayer, or the shortened version of it. The shortened version is give us food, health, and prosperity for the body, efficiency for the mind, and above all, thy love and wisdom for the soul. So that's the short version. So I usually do one of those two, usually the long version. But as soon as I've said the last Amen, the piece of food is already in my and going. The trajectory is towards my mouth. There's not this extra 2 minute period that one of the brothers had. And interesting, another of the monks, we had this meeting during the last Kriya visit. We had this meeting with the coordinators, and I was fasting that day as a complete fast, and then and then they were asking me, "Oh, you should come for the dinner." I said, "No, I'm not. I can come, but it's going to be rude if I'm not eating, so I won't. I won't come." And then at the end of the meeting, brother said, "Oh, you're coming to the dinner." And I said, "Brother, I've got I'm fasting today." And he's like, "I don't. Doesn't matter. You're coming to the dinner." I was like, "Okay, fine. I guess Guruji wants me to come to the dinner." So we went to the dinner, and I was just watching everyone, and he was he was mocking me for not even playfully mocking me, but also always had his arms around me and things like that. So it's quite nice to fast whilst others are eating as well. It's not like that. I felt like it was rude of them, because that's the kind of thing, isn't it? Usually when in etiquette you can't eat if someone's not eating, but
Mm.
it's with family. It's that's not necessarily the case, and that's what it felt like.
Aw. And it's also, we also understand, don't we? Because we're all on the path and we know Guruji's teachings. It's like, yeah, good for you. You stick to it.
Exactly,
Or we
exactly.
hope, anyway.
Yeah, I think you wanted to,
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
probably use it as an example for the others to do
yeah,
fasting and things like that.
yeah, and you know, shows great zeal from you as well, being able to be there. Talking
Mhm.
of temptation, there's a whole temptation in itself. A meal with a monk,
Mm.
you know. Yeah, good for you. Sticking with it. So yeah, we have Guruji here with the Swami, and he finds himself alone with him in his study, and then he asks him, you know, "Oh, why aren't you hungry before?" And he tells us that he spent the last 4 days without any food or drinks. He was completely fasting for 4 days. And he says, "I never eat on trains filled with the heterogeneous vibrations of worldly people. Strictly, I observe the shastric rules for monks of my particular order." This one just hit home for me. I eat a lot on trains. It's just one of those unfortunate things where life is just sometimes as it is, and I find myself sometimes having to have my breakfast on the train, or you know, have some food. And I've been really trying recently to not do that. And then we come across this chapter, and I have this particular section. So I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm getting the message." So I tried practicing this week. I thought, right, can I do a whole week of only eating at home, never eating while I was out? Didn't quite make it, unfortunately. But the days where I did do it, I did notice a difference. I have to say, because you know, we're the environment. It does play such a big part, and you know, especially if you're eating, you know, around a lot of movement. I noticed that you know, the food goes in faster, and it's less has less of a divine quality to it, I guess. But when I'm at home, and you know, I can pray over my food, and I can take some time, and I can really appreciate that moment. Um, yeah, it's very different. So I'm gonna try and keep practicing this, and yeah, just eat at home. But we shall see. Um, But before we move on to talk about the footnote, because there's a footnote about what this shastric rule or rules are, um, Priyank found a lovely paragraph on the wisdom of fasting from Guruji, which would be lovely to read out. So,
It's from the the book Journey to Self-Realization, and the chapter Resurrection, Renewing and Transforming Your Body, Mind, and Spirit.
I'll take it away. Another, excuse me, another thing, every week you should fast 1 day on orange juice to rest the internal organs. You won't die, you will live. Once a month, fast 2 or 3 days consecutively, living only on orange juice. There is so much bondage to matter, of fear to miss a meal. It is so evident we are not living by the Spirit of God, as Jesus Christ spoke about, by living by the Word of God. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Resurrect yourself from this bad mental habit of overeating and palate slavery. When you fast on orange juice, it scrubs every cell. At least once a month, you should give a thorough house cleaning to your body by fasting. Do not let poison accumulate in your system. When you suddenly become sick, you hasten to pray to God for healing. Don't let yourself get sick, says the sick man coughing. Right person to read this one out. The great way to maintain health, and the simplest, is to fast on orange juice one day every week and for 2 or 3 days consecutively. Awesome. A good reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if about you guys, but when after fasting the next day, like little tiny spots on my forehead that'd like vanish. It'd be like completely smooth, and my skin would feel like really like supple, and my joints would feel good, and my stomach just feels like it's been renewed completely. So it's all like really, really nice, isn't it? The impact, the physical
Mm.
impact of fasting. But here, he emphasized this a couple of times in this reading, where it says it's like it scrubs every cell, give your body, give your body a break, a chance to, heal itself, all these kind of things he said. In 2016, there was a Japanese scientist called Yoshinori Oshumi, who, for his discoveries on the mechanisms of autophagy, won the Nobel Prize in science. And autophagy is this thing where essentially he discovered that the benefits of long-term fasting is that stem cells are generated, and then they become obviously healing apparatus for all the various ailments, and can actually cure cancer. He's proven. So there you go. And the other thing is, like, Russians have been fasting for millennia apparently, and there's they've got this scientific study which shows that when when you fast, weak weak cellular matter can't handle fasting. Healthy cells can handle it. So what happened is, after a certain like prolonged phase of without food and water, it has to be without water as well. Um, the weak cells die away, and then what happens is the body turns those cells into this really pure form of water, and then it can basically the body consumes itself from the weak and the negative cellular matter in your body, and produces this really pure water, which is like 10 times better than the regular water that we would have, because it's like self-generated, and it's got these qualities. So the Russians have been doing it for a long time, and now it's scientifically there's probably thousands of papers on the benefits of fasting, and obviously religions across the world have been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, you say there's probably thousands of papers on fasting. There are for sure, and that's what I love about this subject is we've said it so many times that a lot of what Guruji has said ages incredibly well. And he says things very simply, in ways that he doesn't go into it in massive detail, although he does to a reasonable degree on fasting. But science is catching up. Essentially, we have the instruments to be able to observe this now. And there's a link that I just shared with you guys, the National Library of Medicine, the National Center for Biology Information. If anybody wants to Google it, you'll find it pops up first when you search the subject on mindful eating. And it talks about how stress and digestion and mindfulness is sort of linked. And it talks about all the benefits of it. So I think, I wasn't taught this when I was at school, but I think in the Western world, given that the state of health in many of the countries, in the US, the UK, and so on, this will probably become part and parcel. This idea of mindfulness. Guruji talks about relaxation with meditation, how that's essential, and that's what I think about it when I think about being mindful in the way that you eat. You're relaxing, pushing out all the ideas of duty and stress from the mind, and you're focusing on the food. And so, your stress levels probably drop if you're a little bit stressed thinking about work during the day or something. And this all comes into play with what the research is showing in the Western world now, which is very much unrelated to spiritualism, which I love because we talked about it coming full circle, essentially.
Science is catching up, isn't it, with
Mm.
what they've known for a long time. I feel like I should also say that Guruji, as ever, is very balanced with all things, and he does say it does depend on your current health whether you should be fasting or not. So just in case there is anyone listening who is the body is not so healthy right now, you're thinking, oh well, I should fast. Maybe you just have a look at what Guruji says about that, just in case. But anyway, back to the footnote that we are on. The Shastric order, what is this? Chris, can you tell us
Oh, yes,
what the footnote says?
Pertaining to the Shastras, literally means the sacred books, comprising 4 classes of scripture: the Shruti, Smriti, Purana, and Tantra. These comprehensive treatises, yes, cover every aspect of religious and social life, and the fields of law, medicine, architecture, art, etc.
The Shrutis are the directly heard or revealed scriptures, the Vedas. The Smritis are remembered law, were finally written down in a remote past as the world's longest epic poem, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. Puranas, the 18 in number, are literally ancient allegories. Tantras literally mean rites or rituals. These treatises convey profound truths under a veil of detailed symbolism.
Treatises. It's a new word. It's very hard to say, isn't it?
I had to read it twice.
Yeah. I have to say, I do love the footnotes because they give such context and so much understanding, and tidbits of information and facts. And I love learning, so this kind of thing is great. So I do enjoy reading the footnotes. But yes, not much to discuss on that. But I thought it'd be nice just to share it. Priyank.
Yeah, I think you'd raised the point. Do you think Dayananda had read all of the Shastras? That would be one epic undertaking. epic. So I highly doubt it. Especially he was not, he's not a scholar, literary scholar, I don't think. But he's very young as well. It would take probably multiple lifetimes to go through all of the Shastras in Indian history. But he would have, because of as I mentioned, he was probably a Brahmin from a Brahmin family. So he probably went to, or he probably had tutors, Sanskrit tutors, and his family would probably do lots of recitals of during various times of the year. So he would have heard or being able to recite the Shastras more than most of the population. So he would have been. You might classify him as would classify him as a kind of expert in the field. But to say he's read it all is one heck of a statement. So I highly doubt it. But never know. I think one of the rare souls that you could say had was like the Adi Shankaracharya, because he then essentially, because the reason you say that is because he reorganized all of them essentially, and to be able to reorganize, you'd have to have read it all. So he's one of the few that you could probably, with some conviction, say has.
And as we know from earlier on in the book, the biggest lesson is we don't have to have read everything to live it. The most important thing is that we live the truths, right? So yes, the Swami then goes on to tell Mukunda why he was eating so absent-mindedly, and apparently it was because, there were some organizational matters and problems that he was thinking on while he was eating. And he says, "Tonight at home, I neglected my dinner. What's the hurry? Tomorrow I'll make a point to have a proper meal." And I know I've certainly done this quite a few times more recently. And, some of my very caring friends, "Lauren, make sure you eat a meal." And of course, there's a balance to all these things, right? If we keep neglecting, then obviously that's a whole other ball game. But yeah, it's very clear that he's way beyond the bounds of the body, isn't he?
Definitely. Or he's working towards that, or he's saying the
Mm,
affirmations that would lead him to that.
yes.
He's saying all the very most profound things, isn't he? So profound that you almost have to be enlightened to fully live that experience. Probably, obviously, a lot of it's easier to say than do. But here, Mukunda, earlier on, he noticed that Dayananda was eating absent-mindedly, and here Dayananda kind of confirms that. He says, "Today I neglected my dinner. Tomorrow I'll make it a point to have a proper meal." So we know it was 9 o'clock plus, right? So one of the Western sciences now, they tell you not to go to sleep on a full meal, don't they? And here it would imply that he's doing a similar thing. He's probably had a very, very, even though all these delicacies were prepared, he probably ate something very small or only a very little bit of everything that was there, rather than a hearty meal as Mukunda did and remembers for the rest of his life, even when he was writing the autobiography. So here's a good lesson for us, i.e., if it's late and you're hungry, don't go all out. Just have a little bit and satisfy the needs, the bare minimum of the needs of the human body, and the rest will be taken care of. Because the opposite, if we did the opposite, where we did, we responded to how hungry we were with the amount of quantity we ate, then you'd probably overeat, and you'll have a terrible, terrible sleep. And you'll have a terrible meditation certainly before bed, and even the next morning's meditation will be pretty bad. So all around, it's not good to overeat before sleeping. So that's a good lesson.
Fun fact, I heard this about Queen Elizabeth II, that she actually ate very sparsely, sparsely.
Which one
So
is the second? Sorry.
the one who passed,
Okay. The longest
is
serving monarch in the history of monarchism. That one.
exactly, 96 years of age. But I think it was my mum actually noted this about her, that apparently she really did not indulge, even though she had a spread of food in front of her. She was only having maybe sampling parts that she would eat heavily. So
But don't posh people only have they're only allowed to have really small, minuscule portions?
you have to
It's
eat
like
with a knife and fork in very posh ways. Putting the pea on top of the fork, having one at a time. Yeah.
and there's 6 knives and forks as well, so you can't just go all out with one of them. Like when that one's finished, they've got to go. You know.
Here in
It's a whole
Brazil, we
other
use
life.
fork as it's meant to be, which is the other way around, and use it almost as a shovel.
What was that?
Um,
What was that?
in Brazil, they think it's very unusual the way British people would actually use the cutlery, the knife and fork, by skewering and kind of placing on top, whereas they use it more like a shovel over here, scoop it like a spoon. Anyway,
Hmm.
we digress.
That'll be a whole other podcast, wouldn't it? How certain cultures and places eat food and the cutlery. But alas, we're on an autobiography of a yogi, so that will have to be parked for some other time. But yeah, so Swami makes this comment about not being so bothered about missing a meal, which means then he probably would have been more or less fasting for 5 days rather than 4. Anywho, and then Guruji says that at the time, this shame just spread within him like a suffocation. And that's massive, isn't it?
Definitely. I found a good reading on this topic.
Mm,
Do you want to go through it now? Again, from
yes.
the Journey of Self-Realization. And this chapter is increasing your magnetism. And he's written in one of the sections, but why be so preoccupied year after year in adorning only the outer form? America seems very much a place where people concentrate on keeping up their outer image in order to hide their age. I have seen many people looking 40 who were really 60, and that is good. Why shouldn't you keep the body fit and attractive? You should make your body whatever you want it to be. Why be careless and let it go to the pot, as they say? Watch your weight. If your form is disproportionate, it is most likely because of laziness or overeating. Some people diet or fast once a day. Sorry, some people would diet or fast one day and then more than make up for it the next day. Get plenty of exercise and learn to be more careful about what you eat. And this is similar to what Mukunda did, isn't it? He fasted and then more than made up for it the minute the fast was over. And it is a complete opposite of what Dayananda has done, because not only did he fast 5 times the length as Lauren has calculated, he also ate very little and absent-mindedly.
That's another lesson for me as well. Sometimes I find after I've fasted, I do have this, hunger. But
Not alone.
no, right? It's all too easy just to keep piling the food in. But yeah, Chris.
Yeah, our brothers and sisters that do Ramadan, they often, moving to London, met many people that observed Ramadan, and often they would say the same thing, which is, I think it's when the sun goes down, right? They're able to eat for is it 40 days? Full 40 days? It's quite a length of time anyway. That they would sort of stuff their face whenever they could, and I kind of thought, well, that's probably what Guruji is talking about here. There's probably a reason, certain reason for the tradition, but maybe we lose our way with it from time to time. It's good to remind ourselves of why. But yeah, I was told friends of mine would sort of stuff their face at all hours in the morning or nighttime. Thought, yeah, it's probably not doing you good. You're kind of constantly cancelling out all the benefits.
Yeah, I did Ramadan once with my Muslim housemate.
How was that for you?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Just we used to eat 1 minute before sunrise, and then that would get you through the day.
Yeah.
Because you can't eat during the sun being out.
Yeah. Oh. It's lovely that you did it with him as well. Not alone then. Yeah.
And then he ate vegetarian food as well most of that month. Whereas he's obviously Muslims usually eat meat, but so he did a bit of a hybrid scenario. He took some of Indian science.
Well, that's true friendship, isn't it? When you can both help each other on the way. Yeah. And back to the chapter. So Guruji then says, so the Swami's just made this remark about, neglecting dinner, and that was fine. He's not bothered about it, basically. And he describes the past day of his fast being torture, and he hadn't forgotten about it. So he asks this, well, he doesn't really ask, he kind of states here. He said, Swamiji, I am puzzled about following your instruction. Suppose I never ask for food and nobody gives me any. I should starve to death. And then he replies, die then. And he says this alarming counsel split the air. I have to say it's very, very like that, isn't it? I remember when I read this, it was like, whew, yeah. What more can you say? And then he says, die if you must, Mukunda. Never believe that you live by the power of food and not by the power of God. He who has created every form of nourishment, he who has bestowed appetite, will inevitably see that his devotee is maintained. Do not imagine that rice sustains you, nor that money or men can support you. Could they aid if the Lord withdraws your life breath? They are his instruments merely. Is it by any skill of yours that food digests in your stomach? We're just going to pause there because, he's really talking about the full dependency on God, isn't he? And that's what I know personally I'm striving for, is that full surrender, right?
Mm. He's extended this die then analogy and not relying on things. He said that don't think that money or men support you, which so that's obviously relying on God for all sources of not just your health but your wealth as well, and that's part of the prayer, isn't it? The shortened version that I said, give us food, health, and prosperity, the body, and that's in there, isn't it? Because God is the one essentially that gives it to you, and then he says later in this section, he says, is it any skill of yours that food digests in your stomach? So he's saying also, understand that God is responsible for virtually every one of your life energies, and the air that's in your lungs is, and the digestion that's happening because of the food that he's given you and the money he's given you to buy that food.
It's beautiful, isn't it? It's very touching. Yeah. Wow. And it's also that notion of really giving it back to God, isn't it? And realizing it is him. As much as it seems like it's not, it is. And there's a section of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, verse 27, which I thought would be quite nice to read out.
Whatever actions thou dost perform, O son of Kunti, Arjuna, whether in eating, or in observing spiritual rites, or in gift bestowing, or in self-disciplining, dedicate them all as offerings to me.
Oh. Yes. Yeah, Chris.
I'd say maybe Guruji already knew this, right? And he's sort of telling us this experience for our benefit. He had already, when he was younger, convinced a friend of his to escape and go to a different city, and I think it was with the blessing of his brother, right? And they didn't leave with any money, but they left just a bit, and they jumped on a train and went to another city, and there was a individual there that looked at him and took him in and gave him shelter and everything, and that was by God's grace, and that's what Guruji was stating, like he had faith in God's grace to take care of him. So although Guruji here is sort of saying that he was shocked, by these statements, he lived by this. Like he actually lived this already when he was much younger, and he led the way for previous stories that he shared with us. So it's another reinforcement of that same message.
Yeah, it's true. When we really rely on God, he does support us. I had quite a few instances in America when I was over there that, it was really just me and him. And he always sustained us. And yeah, Guruji really knows how to bring us this message, right? So yeah, Chris, thank you for saying that, because it's true. This chapter really is for us, isn't it? To realize. Yeah. And then the Swami carries on and says, use the sword of your discrimination, Mukunda. Cut through the chains of agency and perceive the single cause. So again, he's going back to, look at the root of it all, which is God, right? And, use your discrimination. Don't be fooled by this, Maya and delusion. And it reminded me of Matthew 6:33 when it says, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. It's true, isn't it? See God first. We're always taught that God alone, God first.
Do you think in some way that Guruji is using the wonderful method that you're using, Priyank, as well, with the say desire not to be critical of others instead of using affirmations? And in a sense, when we're reading this, use the sword of your discrimination, cut through the chains of agency and perceive the single cause. And he goes on to say that he finds these words entertaining, entering some deep marrow, and he goes on describing his experience of these words. That is what we are digesting ourselves. Talk about consuming or eating. We are digesting that. We are the ones having that permeate our consciousness and subconsciousness. We are living that just as Guruji wants us to live that, as opposed to saying, hey guys, don't be idiots, you're living wrong, do it this way. And of course there's means, and there's times for being direct and having more of a sharp point. But I just got that impression when I was reading this, like Guruji is willing us to like kind of live through him, by using these persuasive, descriptive wording.
Power suggestion rather than thou shalt.
Yes.
Yeah. And it works, doesn't it? Because, well, I know for me, there's so many things even in this, one or two paragraphs that I go, oh yeah, wow, I want to absorb that and apply it to my own life. So it's true. He knows just how to speak to us, doesn't he? So, and similarly, the Swami knew what to say to Mukunda too, because Guruji says that, when he spoke these words, it entered some deep marrow. And he says, that those past habits basically were gone, and this delusion was gone. And he tasted the Spirit's all-sufficiency there and then. And it's really the power of the word, isn't it? Truth just goes in and reveals Spirit, and wow. Yeah. And then he says Priyank.
Yeah, he says there and then. It's really, I feel like it's a really emphasized, it could be bold, isn't it? Because we read all these things in the lessons and, in the talks that Guruji gives us. And most of the times it's just a case of smiling and nodding, and maybe 1% of the time you might really do what he's done here. There and then I tasted the Spirit's all sufficiency. But here, like Dayananda has made like 7 or 8 really profound points, isn't he? And he's essentially saying that he imbibed all of that, and so there's the difference between Guruji and us, right? So even what truth spoken by even someone that may not be as spiritually as advanced as him, in the grander scheme of things, but he's spoken the truth all the same. God has spoken through him, and then he's like absorbed it, and he's taken it, and he's changed his way of being straight away. Whereas we have to work, we have to churn, we have to hear it a million times and then go, oh yeah, maybe we should do that.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there are some things, I'm sure most of us have had, you read something and it just goes, but something like this, in this scope, and you're right, Priyank, most of the time it is right, let's try really hard. But that's the point, isn't it? We just have to try our best. And that's all, that's our part, right? And then Guruji finishes this little section saying that, later on in his life when he was traveling ceaselessly and there's much going on, he said, did occasion arrive to prove the serviceability of this lesson in the Banaras hermitage. The serviceability of this lesson. And it reminds me of the lessons that Guruji gives us, which I won't go into, but they are serviceable in every aspect of life. And even in autobiography, so many lessons right? Which we can all apply. I feel like I've really got so much to take away from just this fourth section of the chapter. So thank you for such a lovely time delving in. I really enjoyed it. Does anyone else have anything else before we go? I'm seeing shaking heads, so I will end it here. Thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you
Lovely.
for all that have watched or listened, and I will see you next time.